The Lighthouse Keeper's Catastrophe by Rhonda and David Armitage. Mr. Grinling was a lighthouse keeper. He lived with Mrs. Grinling in a little white cottage on the cliffs. Every morning he rode out to his lighthouse to clean and polish the light. Every morning Mrs. Grinling prepared a delicious lunch for him. At lunchtime, Mrs. Grinling packed the lunch in a basket and sent it down the wire to the lighthouse. On high days and holidays, when the sun shone, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling opened up the lighthouse, hung the key safely on its hook inside, and spent many contented hours fishing. Hamish, the cat, lazed about in the sun. From time to time he roused himself to chase the seagulls. This particular morning, chasing seagulls was not what Hamish had in mind. He was much too busy enjoying himself in other ways. Mr. Grinling was not at all pleased when he saw what Hamish was doing. "Move it, pussycat," he snarled, and he chased Hamish into the lighthouse. Slam! "That'll teach you to steal our fish, you little varmint." And without thinking, he slammed the door shut. Mr. and Mrs. Grinling continued with their fishing. Soon Mr. Grinling's stomach rumbled, and it reminded him that lunch would be very welcome. As he went to let Hamish out, he was struck by a terrible thought. The key was where the lighthouse door key. Of course, it was inside. Mr. Grinling did his very best to get Hamish out of the lighthouse. He rattled the locks as hard as he could. He kicked and he cursed. He pushed, but the door stayed firmly shut. "Don't worry," smoothed Mrs. Grinling. "Hamish is quite safe where he is. We have a spare key in the old teapot on the mantelpiece in the kitchen." And just look, poor Hamish in there. He might be safe, but he does look a bit sorry for himself. The spare key was exactly where Mrs. Grinling said it would be, in the teapot, while she prepared cold chicken sandwiches, a fruit salad with lots of strawberries, and a chocolate milkshake for his lunch. Mr. Grinling listened to the midday weather forecast. Oh, it was perfectly dreadful. Wind and rain, with the possibility of thunder and lightning later in the day. "I don't like the sound of that weather, Mrs. G," said Mr. Grinling. "The sooner I get back to the lighthouse, rescue Hamish and switch on the light, the happier I shall be. If you could pack the lunch in the basket, I'll take it with me. Remind me to take a screwdriver. Mrs. G, I have some repair work to do." So, Mr. Grinling set down the steep winding path with his lunch and the key in his lunch basket. It was not until he was halfway down the hill that he heard Mrs. Grinling calling from the little white cottage. "The screwdriver! Mr. G, you've forgotten the screwdriver." "Botheration," he muttered, climbing cliff paths for a plump lighthouse keeper was rather hard work. He put the lunch basket down on the bank and stomped back towards the house. Oh, what a silly man. He really ought to have known better. Already the seagulls were beginning to gather. As he turned the corner, down they swooped, such greedy creatures. They squabbled and flapped and squawked and tugged, trying to get the lunch. Finally the basket started to move. Down the slope it went, tumbling, bumping, faster and faster, over and over, until it came to the cliff edge. For a moment it almost seemed to stop, and then it was gone. And so was the key. Down it drifted, down past the eagle ray and the angelfish to the seabed. There it lay amongst the rocks and the seaweeds, where only the octopus and the crab and other sea creatures would find it again. You're going to have to wait until tomorrow to find out what happens next. Hope you're all keeping safe and well. Stay safe.